next session is titled Connected Commerce Marketing from Buzzword to Winning Strategy, and it's brought to us by our partners at Skai, whose support we greatly appreciate. So please join me in welcoming Nick Weinheimer. He's the General Manager of Strategy for Skai. Nick, I'll rejoin you and your guest toward the end of your session for your key takeaways and some audience Q&A. But until then, let's take it away, Nick.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah, sorry, I got hands full here.
No worries. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Thank you. See you guys in a bit.
All right. This is great. I think I always want to follow a session where The Princess Bride was referenced. One of my favorite movies growing up. I'm very excited to be with you all today at the Commerce Week event. My name is Nick Weinheimer. I lead strategy at Skai. I'm joined by Tyler Beatty from BISSELL. So we'll get right into it and give you a section here, Tyler, in just 1 second. So we're going to talk today connected commerce marketing, right? I've heard connected commerce thrown around in a bunch of different ways. We'll try to ground it today and what that means for those of us at Skai and our clients and partners, and how we kind of turn it from this buzzword into a winning strategy. And it's very much a process. It's not a binary on-off, as Tyler and I have discussed. So we'll talk a little bit about and hear from Tyler about how that process is going, and how every organization is probably at a different a part of their evolution in moving in that direction. So really briefly, who is Skai? You may recognize the artist formerly known as Kenshu. We rebranded from Kenshu, a little over a year and a half ago. We have, over the years, with our start, building a very powerful management layer on top of Google and then Facebook, many other channels, but in 2017 had the opportunity to pivot our enterprise search stack into the Amazon ecosystem, then very quickly built partnerships with Walmart, Instacart, Target, and our friends at Criteo and CitrusAd, and now with just dozens of retailers in the platform, as well as our core within search and social, we've become one of the leading omni-channel platforms for planning, activating, measuring across all of these new investments. And what excites me the most about these conversations is just how much we can become the actual action-oriented part of how you start evolving your strategies and taking learnings from this, taking data that's part of your business and or the ecosystem, and actually starting driving that into actionability with the leverage you can pull. So excited to talk from that perspective today, but excited to introduce Tyler from BISSELL.
Yes, thank you, Nick. So here today from BISSELL in digital marketing there. And a little bit of what we're going to talk about today is really focused on the Amazon ecosystem and how we can kind of bring together this idea of connected commerce. So a little plug here for BISSELL, 145 years of floor care innovation. And if you ask me, I've created some of the best products there. I used to be on the product marketing side in our upright deep cleaners and portable deep cleaners, but I've shifted into kind of the more digital space, and now kind of manage our advertising strategy specifically on Amazon.
And I promised I wouldn't make any jokes about making decisions in a vacuum, but I did it anyway. So what's setting the stage today, right? I think a lot of what we're hearing about is certainly an explosion in retail media. There's a paradigm shift in the industry, more onus on the brands than typically was in the past, where retailers owned the conversation with the consumer. We've got new types of media, shoppable media types, this intersection in a very nonlinear customer journey of very interesting social engagements with brands and products that meet a retail experience that's evolving, right? This is a very kind of hybrid transitional time for the consumer. Certainly that ladders up into brands and retailers. And loyalty is up for grabs, as you face major issues, macroeconomic issues that might affect inventory, are the things consumers are proving that they're willing to shift their loyalty on a very kind of thin margin. So, and the channel mix that goes into attracting that consumer is starting to shift. And especially for those brands who relied so much on their retailers in the past and on a very kind of clean-cut branding strategy, this is, more of these kind of performance-oriented channels are starting to come to the fore to people like Tyler to rationalize within the business. And it's creating some interesting shifts in businesses that looked one way for many, many years, but rapidly in the last 4 have changed. And certainly in our whole industry around marketing and advertising, we know as major technology platforms start to deprecate this little pesky cookie that's out there, we've all heard about it, that's going to be another major shift for how we think about huge, enormous segments of our investments. And as we look at what connected commerce is doing, inside organizations, it's really creating a kind of from-to paradigm. what used to be a very delineated offline, online portion of a brand's business is becoming more omni, looking kind of cross-channel, in-store, even pairing with your D2C. And Tyler and I have talked a lot about some of those dynamics at Bissell. From very reactive to the decisions and attempts that you've made in your marketing to much more intelligent, data-driven, predictive, trying to figure out how closely can I project, where am I going to see diminishing returns? What's my opportunity on this channel? And from being channel-centric to more consumer-centric. If I know that that customer is going through a much more non-linear process to find my end product, how do I reach them in those non-linear parts of their journey? And then from just being branding or just being performance-oriented, we're starting to see a lot more full-funnel relevancy and consistency. We'll hear a little bit from Tyler about what that kind of fluidity looks like in the different elements of the funnel. And then I loved hearing also just some of the commentary just in this previous panel around like this notion of attribution, right? Just going from does everything have to hit a certain ROAS to what, maybe it's more of a measurement paradigm. What are the different kind of variables in this calculus that I'm trying to solve for? And that can be different across different product lines or for different partners. But how do I arrive at a measurement paradigm and not just sort of a kind of a vanity metric that defines my opportunity? So this is where we at Skai start to see this notion of connected commerce marketing come together, where you really can tie together all of the data and insights that are going to drive this into actual actionability in the channels that are starting to give you a lot more levers to pull. So we did a little bit of work with some of our partners. Obviously, we stay very closely coordinated with Cleveland Research Company as well, and they have a stat that I think is very telling that also sets the table, that 72% of brands don't have the data, tools, or know-how to embrace connected commerce marketing to its full potential. That really resonated with us. We believe in this notion of connected commerce. We built technology to support it. But from this baseline, I think we're going to start getting into the meat and potatoes here with Tyler to talk a little bit about a few of the data points that we got from a survey that we did of 160 or so clients, marketers, partners of ours, that was really telling on the state of retail media in 2022. So I'm going to go through a few of those stats, and we're going to hear kind of Tyler's insider scoop on that. So I promise enough from me on the setup, and we'll go right into it. So when we look at the kind of the machinations of the teams inside Bissell, right? Overseeing this, the retail media buckets, they're changing inside lots of organizations. CMOs are getting into retail media in a big way, where that used to be just trade-oriented sales teams, right? As you guys can kind of absorb the slide here, but when you think about your organization, right, we see e-commerce teams, dedicated retail media teams. Like, how does this get structured inside Bissell, and is that shifting over time?
Yeah, I think it's definitely, there's a group of people. There's people that need to be informed, and then there's people that are actually driving the decisions and making the day-to-day actions. And I think if you were to ask the organization, they'd want this to be flat. Everyone wants a say in this, but ultimately it's going to be up to the people that are in the data, making optimizations, and ultimately that are seeing kind of the day-to-day picture.
And I would say in a lot of the conversations we have with many of our large CPG clients, right, what used to be these siloed sales organizations or shopper teams per retailer, we're starting to see a lot more dotted line structures across the organization, where rationalizing a budget potentially that is managed from the top down across these previously siloed structures is much more commonplace. And that e-commerce team statistic, I think, speaks to that, where there is responsibility and checks and balances even against, right? If you live in a brand organization and you have a sales number to hit with a certain client of yours or retailer, you want all the dollars to spend for your client, your retailer, right? So some of these are going to be natural.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's kind of the way that we have to approach it now, is understanding that dollars spent in one place are also going to drive sales in another place. So making sure that you have the right mix and also kind of the right strategy behind that to do so. And that's kind of the whole piece of connected commerce.
Absolutely. So one of the most interesting things that we saw from the survey results was just how fluid budgets are within retail media. Almost 80% of the respondents said that they were at least somewhat fluid, if not very fluid, with their budgets between their retailers or these investments in retail media. Which, by the way, what I love about this notion of retail media is nowhere does it say digital. And I think we're starting to see a lot more. You see Walmart, making, shifting their buyers to being, both online, offline, right? We're seeing organizations start to think through this notion of shopper inclusive of all of these retail media investments. for you guys, right, as you're shifting, you're going through this process towards connected, right, and you're kind of looking after Amazon more, but there are other teams, right, in your group. How fluid are these budgets?
They have to be now. I think with just the way that, supply chain issues, the economy, you have to be fluid with where the budget's going, but also deeper into that, selling on Amazon, we have a multitude of categories where we have to split budget up between, what's hot right now. We need to advertise that product potentially. So budget fluidity is something that just has to become the norm, and you have to be okay with shifting budget to certain places to ultimately drive the sale and to get the advertisement or whatever you might be trying to drive in front of the consumer that's ultimately going to lead to a conversion. That's kind of the way that we think about things today.
Sure. And you had mentioned when we talked previously that there was maybe some fluidity within the funnel, even within certain retailers.
Absolutely. That's another piece you have to consider is, bottom of the funnel, we think about search. They're there, they're going to make a conversion, but if we have, a new product or we're introducing something, we're having a certain time period or event, I think it's also important to drive kind of top of funnel consideration on and off Amazon. And so that's one thing that has to be fluid throughout the year and that we just kind of take with stride. We have a set budget to start the year, but that budget isn't necessarily allocated to one form of media or the other.
One of the areas where we've seen our technology start to drive some of this fluidity is in previously more siloed organizations where the Walmart team does not talk to the Amazon team, and if they're not taking learnings there or seeing opportunity between them, why would you shift budget between these? If those are all in one platform and everybody is able to kind of benchmark or baseline based on some of the other investments that are happening, or even something as simple as knowing as rapidly as some of these ad APIs can tell you that there's a stock issue on one channel, that could be an opportunity for retailer B. If somebody kind of in a more matrix layer is saying, we need to move budget over here this week, we've got an inventory issue or a stock out. If you don't have that level of coordination, you're missing some really easy layups for the business. One of the things that and it's sort of a good segue into it, is just how coordinated is your investment in retail media with other digital ad channels. None of these are, and again, in silos. I won't say in a vacuum, but it's the first thing that comes to my mind. But when you think about, for your example, right, you guys have a really respectable D2C business as well as your kind of your retail partnerships. Certainly within D2C, you're going to see a lot more investment in search and in social, kind of traditionally driving that user acquisition versus driving search within these retailers. Are you seeing new or more coordination or interest in that in your organization, or is that an uphill climb for you guys?
I think you have to be. That's one shift that we've seen kind of since maybe 2020 is needing to integrate all these things together and knowing kind of what levers drive other portions of the business too. So it's something that we've been pushing, but there's a lot of data moving in, and it's kind of we've taken a little bit of a step back and kind of focused, me specifically, on the Amazon business and how we can drive that and understand all of the data and performance metrics that we have coming in to make more informed decisions on the Amazon business. But ultimately, end state, and I think would kind of be to a system where we have everything in one platform and we can see eventually kind of what drives each area of the business.
We certainly agree with that. It's something we see a lot of. If you're not taking insights and search queries from what's happening in your search business that may be driving your D2C and then influencing how you're investing in your Amazon or Walmart search or any of the others, you're missing opportunities. These are the same consumers in that nonlinear journey. If you're not taking those insights, even if you're not managing it, as long as that data is in one place and you can start to coordinate it, there's so much more opportunity to dive into. Just as a quick aside, one of the most sophisticated things I've seen is somebody within managing Amazon retail media spend knew that by aligning their basically mapping their organic ranking to their organic sales, that if they moved a certain position in the organic ranking, it was worth an incremental $100,000. Not the exact number in monthly sales, right? Wasn't these guys, I promise. And they knew that if they spent $50,000 on Facebook, they could get a certain amount of add to carts or conversions that would move them that organic position. So without doing Amazon attribution or anything, they knew that the higher level math of if I can just use this to hit those metrics to move my organic position, it's going to be positive on the ROI. And that type of coordination is super valuable to think through. Definitely. Leveraging a channel like Facebook in a way that previously your organization didn't. If it was all reach and frequency for you in the past, or you might have used it a little bit to drive into some of your retail partners, or you're working with a great solution like Micmac, who's on stage, something like, right. There are much more interesting ways to start to integrate these technologies together, these media channels, in a more coordinated way. I think it's not too surprising to see this result when asked what are the two biggest challenges that the marketers face within retail media or are going to face this year, and proving incrementality, right? A third of them said that, but almost half said driving positive ROI, and you hear it in almost every conversation. If it's apples and oranges in attribution, or there's not enough data coming from the channel. It's clear that these are the biggest challenges, but why, or are these? Is this resonating with your organization?
Yeah, I think it'd be foolish to say that ROI is not important, but I think how we define it maybe needs to change a little bit, and it's not necessarily showing a ROAS from Amazon ads, because we know that's going to be inflated. I love reporting it out because it looks awesome, but at the end of the day, there's a lot that's baked into doing business and selling on Amazon that we need to consider. So, yeah, I think you need to come up with some custom metrics that might be specific to your business, to your organization, that are ultimately going to show, what actually is driving the incrementality. Is that ROAS actually providing to our bottom line at the end of the day? Those are the things that you need to understand. And I think you mentioned ad proximity earlier, and our organic ads showing up close to our sponsored ads, is that really the best investment for us? Should we shift investment elsewhere? So I think there's just a lot that goes into it, and in providing the organization line of sight to that is something kind of in the direction that we need to be going specifically.
What excites me about this balancing act, or more of a calculus or a measurement paradigm, is that, not to be shameless, but like connecting this all together, getting these data sets in one place, seems like an obvious thing, but in reality, and some of you are probably from these organizations, getting that previously siloed group to get their data set to be situated alongside yours, or with that, that team's channel investment, right? Doing this is akin to, and all of us have probably worked in organizations that use an ERP or a Salesforce platform. That's an organizational level investment to say, we're going to connect this all together. We're going to define how our business operates, from opportunity all the way through to the account, and everything reported in one place. If you're not even attempting to get that level of coordination with how actually similar and important these different kind of what can seem very disparate efforts within your organization, you're missing a huge opportunity to kind of arrive at that next level of really bringing a measurement paradigm, a calculus that does look at margin contribution per product, or SKU prioritization paired with the seasonality or the lifetime value. These are data sets that you're not necessarily going to feed back to the retailer, right? Or that you previously didn't need to share between retail teams. It was just, are we hitting our numbers or not, right? And then it starts to really drive in with some of the gaps between what retailers share with you and what you have as an organization. You can solve for that. The whole industry around kind of coordinated, the kind of third-party derivative measures. You've heard from Sarah from Profitero. There are other players out there, right, that can start to fill in that gap, give you ideas of what are the kind of search volume estimates, and what is my market share and category share. Should that be your end-all be-all measure for your investment? Probably not. But is it a really important part of a whole, that when you are trying to tell the story for this grouping of products that are prioritized a certain way, or that have these types of challenges, you can start to get a much more, I guess it's like more modern and kind of data-driven paradigm, instead of just, hey, you know what, or we're hitting a ROAS number, but we're tanking our category share, right? So this is, I think, what technology, like especially integrating all this data into one technology platform, you can start to arrive, or at least move toward this paradigm as an organization. And interestingly enough, the retailers themselves, when asked, and we had a number of our retailer partners respond to our survey as well, they did say measuring success in a way that's meaningful to my organization, as well as driving positive ROI. But that third one differed from what the brands responded with, and that is getting the data needed to make data-driven decisions, and having built partnerships with a lot of these large retailers with their retail media businesses, and being one of the key lobbyists, let's call it, for these retailers thinking about sharing data with their brands to help them make these decisions, right? Facebook and Google are going to be happy to give you, and maybe too much, as much information as they can to help you make a data-driven decision or an optimization. Retailers know that there's a gap there, and it's challenging when you're the publisher and you're also negotiating with your brand, right? Amazon doesn't want you to know how many vacuums they sell in California,
Right.
in any case. So coming up to the end of time, it's really fun to pack together 15 years of enterprise technology and like 145 years of floor care into 20 minutes, but we'll do our best. I think if we have some key takeaways here, number one, I think the future growth, if you're trying to influence your organization, or you're going to bring back insights from this, trying to deliver this notion of connecting data, democratizing information within your organization, and wielding technology to make that available to your group, that's going to be your future. Don't lose sight of Amazon as you think about going down different new paths. With 77% of the share of the retail media market, I think it's important we keep our eye on the prize and start there as you guys are, and maybe then branch out. Yep. Number two, the channel connectivity is one part of connected commerce, but it starts with data foundation across the board, and that effort is going to pay off in spades down the line just by spending those few months, those dev cycles, pushing that data into a platform that can help you make heads or tails of it. And then don't boil the ocean. While it's easy to look at that big, beautiful measurement paradigm and say we have to do all of this today, it can start by integrating some interesting sales figures or some lifetime value data that can just start to give marketers like Tyler the data that they need to tell a more interesting story. Mm-hmm. Any key takeaways for you before we jump into
I think
Q&A? If there are any?
The most important thing is just to start somewhere. You have to, like you said, crawl before you can walk, and that's ultimately what we're doing right now. And I think we've had a ton of valuable insights come of this too, and connecting just Amazon Business and making optimizations there and understanding kind of our total business. So I would, start somewhere is what I would say.
Absolutely. We all have to. Happy to answer some questions at the last few minutes that we have, if there are any. Got a hand up over here. The gentleman from Boston.
Hey, how are you? You mentioned a few partners and building like a measurement stack, if you will, measurement paradigm. Yeah. How would you recommend going about selecting those vendors and evaluating them when the measurement itself is such a challenge? And a lot of these partners are SaaS platforms that probably want to lock you into a year-long deal without a trial.
I'm all for 2-3 year deals with technology partners if you can get them. I mean, yes. I think it's going to start from the brand. Tyler, maybe kick it to you because we are ultimately fairly agnostic to what are the data sets that you would acquire that are outside what we natively are going to pull from the APIs of the channels that we directly integrate with. Mm-hmm. If they are what you decide to use, if that is your true north, most of them are going to have some sort of margin of error if they're not coming from the source of truth. But if they are proxies and they are valuable in directional analysis, make your choice and stick to it. Like going in the other direction, certainly you're gonna analyze what key unique features there are from these measurement partners. I mean, it's a big question. It's certainly where would we focus that. But I think a lot of the data providers should and would, and just like we will, proof of value is a very important thing. I wouldn't suggest signing up for a long-term agreement until you've kind of seen that or are willing to buy into it. But Tyler, how do you guys think about that question?
No, I think the fewer wires that cross is ultimately the best thing. Direct API connection is always going to be the most honest source of truth. That might have contradicted each other, but it's going to be the biggest source of truth there. So that's anytime you can have a direct API and bring in as many APIs into one system, I think that's going to provide the most accuracy. And it's also, bugs happen, issues happen. It's also the easiest to fix through that. So from kind of like the vendor side, that's what I would say.
And happy to chat more over a cocktail, Adam, if you want. Anyone else? Oh, a virtual question. I'm getting the point down here. BISSELL is a well-known brand, but for smaller, lesser-known, maybe D2C brands, how do you see the challenges and opportunities differ in this regard? Maybe that's harder to ask of you if you've been in a large brand, but
no, I think it's there's a lot of parallels of doing business on Amazon. There's opportunities for everyone, no matter the size of the brand. And when I say opportunity, there's a lot of data that you're able to get and acquire and bring in and make strategic decisions on. I think having that data is most important, but having a place to store that data is also most important there. So I think Excel is great. It has its place, but I think having a system where you can actually kind of pull levers and do some analysis is going to be really important no matter the size of the business. And sorry if anyone is from Microsoft here.
Yeah, I think for the large brand, small brand, I mean, one of the classic things that I see anyway is that the smaller brands tend to be very nimble. They can make decisions quickly, intra-cycle. We talk a lot about how you're influencing your organization. There's potentially, this is the way things have been done. Trying to get them to shift the way that these investments are made could be different, whereas a smaller brand, you have the opportunity to be more nimble, to cut those corners and get to that state that you see when you go to a conference. You can flip your company around in a couple months versus what's going to maybe take a couple of years.
Yeah, and I think it's the day-to-day that you're going to optimize too. It's going from task-oriented maybe to analysis, and that's probably the biggest thing, is that a connected platform like Skai, and this is not a Skai platform as much as I like you, Nick, but it's the ability to kind of simplify my day-to-day, to have the system kind of showing me what I need to know at a glance, and then making decisions off of that.
Good stuff. Barring any other questions, I think we're good to wrap. Yeah, thank you all.
Another great session. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.